The arena floated in orbit above a mauve gas giant whose storm spelled epithets in fractal lightning. Officially, it was called the Amphitheater of Unified Glory. Unofficially, most referred to it as the Pit, though some, particularly the Tharnkai, preferred the Economic Execution Complex, which sounded fancier on the broadcast summaries. It was designed for a single purpose: combat. Not the brutish kind with trenches and logistics and regrettable treaties. No, this was the glamour of war. The pomp. The spectacle. The illusion that violence, properly televised and monetized, could be poetry. Every sentient species with a flag or a philosophy sent its champion to the pit. Victories here determined everything from trade routes to breeding rights to which species got to pick the next galactic anthem, a highly contested honor since the Brellic won with a screeching dirge composed entirely in explosive clicks. This year's tournament was especially charged. The Graviathan Empire had gone undefeated for the past 7 cycles, and Zulok the Carver, their reigning titan, had crushed his way through the semifinals with all the delicacy of a neutron star landing on a birthday cake. From the luxury balconies suspended on quantum thread, 1,000 dignitaries observed the pre-fight rituals through a haze of calming spores. Below them, the audience writhed. Seats were a suggestion. Spherical organisms hovered beside crystalline arachnids. Carnivorous blossoms waved pseudopodia at concession drones. Everything stank of roasted kelp, gun oil, and overconfidence. It was the kind of smell that clung to the soul. "And now," boomed the announcer in 6 harmonized voices, "prepare your oculars, ganglia, and moist zones for the final bout of the Galactic Unity Games." Lights dimmed. Holograms flared. The arena's floor shifted through terrain presets, molten craters, ice ridges, artificial gravity inversions. It finally settled on something deemed Earth Authenticity Level 4. Dense foliage, vines, humidity turned up to swampy despair. The audience chittered in confusion. Jungle simulations were outdated, unfashionable. Worse, they were low budget. The Brellic delegate leaned toward his aide and muttered something acidic, which melted a small piece of his assistant's ear. The first fighter to enter was, of course, Zulok. His arrival was a gravitational event. Literally. As he stepped onto the platform, the air flexed. Metal groaned. At full height, he resembled a cathedral built by someone who hated right angles. Obsidian plating shimmered with gravitational runes. Spines unfolded from his back like solar panels on a weaponized satellite. Zulok did not wave to the crowd. He roared, and a section of ceiling fell in reverence. Then came the human. There was no trumpet, no rousing anthem. The only sound was the creak of old boots and the hiss of recycled oxygen. Mira Ellis stepped into the light looking like the afterthought of a war that had already regretted itself. She wore mismatched gear, a sheath of what might have been snake leather across one shoulder, and mud-caked pants that seemed to have absorbed more history than hygiene. Is she holding a vine?" the announcer asked, scandalized. Indeed, Myra's left hand toyed with a length of sinewy jungle root, knotted at intervals. Her other hand rested casually on the hilt of something that wasn't quite a knife and wasn't quite not a knife. It had the glint of bone and bad memories. She squinted up at the lights like they owed her money. Presenting the challenger, the announcer attempted to inject enthusiasm. From Earth, a species previously thought extinct due to ecological self-sabotage and the widespread ingestion of dairy, Mira Ellis, Class 7 sentient mammalian combatant. Laughter, mostly from the Tharnkai box. The eel-like diplomats jiggled in their exo-chairs, telepathically sharing jokes that were entirely condescending and mostly illegal. Mira said nothing. She walked to her mark, stopped, and sniffed the air. Zulok thudded forward, one gravitational footstep at a time. His voice, when he spoke, translated into something close to a wet landslide. "You are the final challenge? I have torn through apex predators, silicate juggernauts, and sentient blades. What are you?" Mira tilted her head. "I'm the thing the jungle sends when it's tired of being cut." It was not the kind of line the audience had expected. Some hissed. Others, particularly the Medhari, sentient wind spirits, swirled appreciatively. The judges conferred briefly, then gestured with 12 appendages to initiate the formalities. The sacred creed was first. Zolocht slammed a claw into his chest plate, generating a ripple in the local gravity field that briefly inverted a camera drone. Strength is gravity. Those without weight are forgotten. Mira stepped forward, barely lifting her voice. Camouflage. Patience. Strangle before screaming. The rituals concluded with the offering of weapons. A drone descended with options. Plasma spears, atomic chains, cryoblades. Zolocht reached out and selected a maul roughly the size of Myra's childhood trauma. It purred as it powered up, gravitational nodes humming with malice. Mira ignored the selection entirely. She crouched and retrieved a serrated shard from the simulated underbrush. The crowd gasped. It was a piece of bone. Old, blackened, smooth from long wear. "That," muttered one of the commentators, "is unsanitary." The arena lights pulsed amber. A countdown began, pulsing with the heartbeat of 1 trillion viewers across the galaxy. Diplomats leaned forward. War analysts initiated live prediction streams. The Brelic ambassador began salivating uncontrollably. The Methari swirled into betting clouds. Mira didn't twitch. In the control room, a technician flagged a warning. The simulation's humidity had climbed past safety thresholds. The jungle was getting too real. Admin brushed it off. No one cared about atmospheric danger when one fighter weighed 8 metric tons and the other had a stick. As the countdown neared 0, Mira finally moved. Not much. Just a small, subtle shift of her stance. The kind that meant nothing unless you knew how she'd moved before. Her boots sank slightly into the soil. Her breathing slowed. Somewhere inside her, a circuit primed. Not mechanical, trained. 3, 2, 1. Silence. Then the gong. Zolocht moved first, as expected. He launched forward with all the finesse of a landslide wrapped in a black hole. His maul came down in an arc designed to crack moons, and the audience leaned forward, collectively thrilled to witness a human's immediate obliteration. The impact cratered the terrain, sent vines lashing skyward, and sprayed mud over the front rows. But Mira was gone. No fanfare. No teleportation. Just gone. Zolocht snarled. His sensors flickered. The jungle twisted. Gravity rippled in annoyance. "Coward!" he roared. "Surface mammal!" From the treetops came a quiet rustle. A bird-like creature, likely just part of the simulation, flapped once, then burst into flames from residual gravity discharge. Mira reappeared 10 meters away, crouched low in a patch of moss. She flicked something off her boot. "Strike one," she muttered, mostly to herself. The crowd began to notice. She wasn't dodging randomly. She was using the environment. Not just hiding, but guiding him. Each attack from Zolocht tore more of the terrain, created more debris. And Mira moved through it like a ghost that held grudges. "She's setting up," the Methari commentator whispered, suddenly uneasy. But what she was setting up for remained unclear. Zolocht, enraged, slammed both fists into the ground. The gravity around him warped, slamming every object, including Mira, into the dirt. She grunted, forced flat, breath crushed from her lungs. The arena floor cracked. Still, she moved. Slowly, deliberately, sliding one knee under her body. Her hand reached out, gripped something in the vines. Another shard of bone. A match to the first. Her eyes locked on Zolocht. His face twisted in triumph, tusks vibrating with impending monologue. "I have broken planets," he bellowed. "You think mud will save you?" Mira stood. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just rose, one vertebra at a time, as though she decided not to die purely out of professional obligation. "Not mud," she said. "Memory." Zolocht blinked. Confused. The vines at his feet suddenly tightened. He looked down. Snare traps. Dozens of them. All rigged, not with explosives or blades, but with old jungle tech, tension wires, leverage lines, collapsing footholds. Primitive. Elegant. Devastating. They yanked at his legs, disrupted his footing, triggered gravity inversions that had been building in the ambient field. He roared. Not in pain. In outrage. This was not war. This was ambush. Mira was already moving. She sprinted, not at him but around him, slicing vines with each pass. The field shifted. The ground gave. Zulok's own mass became his enemy. He stumbled. His weapon spun. For 1 second, he was exposed. She leapt. Blade out. And then blackout. The feed cut. Every screen in the galaxy went dark for exactly 4 seconds. When the image returned, Mira stood over the fallen Titan. Her blade was buried deep in the junction where neck met carapace. A perfect cut. Precise. Clean. She stepped back. Zulok didn't move. The crowd didn't cheer. They were still catching up. Only the Methari shimmered appreciatively, whispering, "Oh," she waited for the gravitational inversion. Calculated drift vectors. That's art. Mira turned, squinted at the nearest camera. "Jungle says hi," she said, and walked off. Behind her, the vines rustled. Not with wind, but with memory. Mira Ellis did not care for parades, particularly the kind thrown in her honor by beings who thought a fine earth beverage consisted of fermented blue algae and something that tasted like battery acid filtered through pine needles. She stood on the outer edge of the gala platform, sipping from a tall glass of not-quite champagne while scanning the alien dignitaries, most of whom were busy revising treaties, exchanging panicked whisperglows, or plotting minor coups disguised as celebratory dances. Her victory had destabilized at least 3 trade alliances and crashed the betting markets of the Western Spiral Arm. The Duvok Syndicate alone had lost so many credits they had reportedly vaporized 2 of their own accountants in frustration, a tragic loss for the field of abacus-integrated wetware. Mira hadn't asked to win. She hadn't even asked to fight. But someone had to remind the galaxy that the jungle, Earth's jungle, not these tame, terraformed imitations, was not something to mock. You didn't just laugh at a species that had trained spiders, eaten poison berries on purpose, and spent centuries turning mud into military doctrine. Unfortunately, her quiet corner did not remain quiet for long. "You smell like chlorophyll and contempt," said a familiar, slithering voice. Mira didn't turn. "Hello, Ambassador Zrak. I see your species still considers olfactory insults a form of diplomacy." Zrak coiled beside her, his gleaming scales reflecting the room's bioluminescent chandeliers. He was Tharn Kai, a creature of elegance, mucus, and ruthlessly negotiated ceasefires. Like most Tharn Kai, he slithered as though the floor existed solely for his benefit and wore a diplomatic sash woven from silken nerve fiber, regifted from a defeated enemy, if the rumors were true. "You humans are fascinating," he said, tone dripping with the same performative curiosity usually reserved for toxic plants. "You bleed easily and yet refuse to expire. It's almost admirable. Like fungus." High praise, coming from a sentient eel in a bathrobe. Zrak hiss-laughed. "You were not meant to win. No one ever is. Until they do." He flicked his tongue thoughtfully, then drifted off toward the dance platform where someone was being ritually challenged to a duel via interpretive stomping. Mira took the moment to vanish. The corridors of the amphitheater ran deep and senseless, built according to architectural logic now illegal in 3 systems. Mira found the quieter maintenance tunnels more honest. Less ceremony, more rust. She slipped through them until she reached the holding level, the part of the complex where the next fighters were already being prepped for the next tournament, 2 years out. She paused outside one containment cell. Inside was a creature that defied conventional shape. The screen read, "Name, Scarveth, Bloodline Sovereign of the 8th Howl. Species, Gravik Prime. Combat Rating, Cataclysm Plus. Status, Dormant, Sensory Dream State, Do Not Interrupt." Scarveth was not just a contender. He was the future champion. If Zulok was a cathedral, Scarveth was the apocalypse that followed. He was plated in multi-phase armor that looked grown, not built. His eyes, closed now, were rumored to see into ultraviolet betrayal patterns. Rumors said he'd once torn an orbital platform in half after a minor scheduling disagreement. And he had watched Myra's match. Security logs confirmed it. No one had seen him move, but his neural activity had spiked. Spectacularly. Mira pressed her hand to the reinforced glass and studied him. "So," she murmured, "you're what they send after the jungle." Scarveth stirred. Just slightly. Enough to suggest he'd heard. That was all she needed. Back in her quarters, a repurposed herbarium whose plant life had long since surrendered to dust, Mira sat on the edge of a bed that smelled of metal and apology. She cleaned her boots with a methodical precision born from years of routine. Mud. Blood. Powdered spore. She scraped each layer with the kind of reverence others reserved for prayers. Outside, the lights of the city station blinked in artificial twilight. Stars didn't twinkle here. They pulsed, artificial and distant, like a heartbeat out of sync. Mira checked her messages. Dozens of offers. Endorsement deals. Training contracts. A particularly disturbing invitation from a species that reproduced via interpretive breathing. She deleted them all. Except one. Sender, Aegis, 9 Command Archive. Subject, Operation Vinesweep, unsealed file, eyes only. She hesitated, then opened it. The document flickered to life, hollow footage from years past. Jungle terrain. Real this time. Not simulation. Not the amphitheater's approximation of heat and danger. She watched a team of humans move through dense canopy. Quiet. Focused. Shadows dressed in moss and patience. Then explosions. Screams. The camera jolted as something massive, too massive, shredded the underbrush. A flash of a maw. A howl that was not of earth. Mira paused the footage on a frame that showed half a face. Bloodied. Smiling. Her face. Then, static. She closed the file. The jungle was not just a metaphor. Not to her. It was memory. A training ground and a graveyard. Every vine told a story. Every root remembered the tread of boot and claw alike. Zolocht had been powerful. Scarveth would be worse. But they had one thing in common. They all believed domination was loud. Mira had learned early that the jungle favored the quiet. She stood, cracked her neck, and crossed to the corner where her weapons were stored, not in locked crates, but loosely draped in bundles of vine netting. Each blade was hand-fashioned. Bone. Steel. Resin. Each one held history. She picked a smaller blade. The one with the notch. The one she hadn't used in years. It had been a gift. From someone who'd never come back from Operation Vinesweep. Someone who'd believed in the old ways, before Earth had started branding its special forces like performance products. Her internal comm pinged. "Visitor," said the AI. "Who?" "Classified diplomatic clearance." "Let them in." The door hissed open to reveal a creature that looked like it had been sketched in a fit of caffeine-induced spite. 8 legs, each with a different number of joints. A head shaped like a crooked hourglass. It wore a single sash that declared it was not to be insulted, touched, or offered boiled liquids. "I am 19TTH, it said. Official oddskeeper and narrative engineer for the Unified Bookmakers Guild. Mira raised an eyebrow. "You're a bookie." Elegant term. "Yes." It scuttled forward and unrolled a small scroll. Literal parchment. Mira blinked. "Your odds before the Zolocht match were 12 billion to 1. After your victory, you caused an economic inversion. Entire planets had to recalibrate their GDP. The Tharnkai have filed a formal complaint." "Good." 19TTH tapped the scroll. "Scarveth is now favored at 2 to 1. You. 500,000 to 1. Some think this is an overcorrection." "Some. My uncle. He runs a worm-fighting league. Very shrewd." "Why are you here?" "To ask what you're planning. On record." "I'm planning," Mira said, returning to her blade, "to stay alive." 19th tilted its head. "How anticlimactic." She shrugged. "Not if you understand the jungle." It left shortly after, muttering something about narrative arcs and unsatisfying foreshadowing. Mira didn't care. Her plan wasn't for the audience. It was for Scarveth. Later that night, she found herself in the sim room again, overriding protocols to run terrain programs deemed obsolete. Mangrove swamp. Floodplain. Triple canopy Amazonian convergence. She walked the simulated grounds like a ghost returning to the site of its own murder. Somewhere in the mist, she heard a branch crack. Simulation anomaly? No. A test. She pivoted, blade in hand. The attacker came fast. No species ID. Just mass, momentum, rage. She dropped low, let it pass, struck once behind the knee joint equivalent. The sim froze. AI voice, feedback profile complete. Combat diagnostic within expected range. No errors. Mira exhaled. So did the figure in the mist. A figure that wasn't part of the sim. It stepped forward. Human. Tall. Lean. Wearing a cloak that shimmered with heat-reactive camouflage. Mira. She stared. You're dead. The man smirked. Mostly. They upgraded my classification. Ghost. Classified asset. She kept the blade up. Why now? Because you embarrassed the galaxy's biggest predator. Now they're sending something worse. Scarveth. He nodded. Not just a fighter. He's a ritual. A message. From who? From the ones who think Earth survival was a clerical error. She lowered the blade slowly. The air around them thickened as the sim tried to resolve the emotional incongruity. You want to help? She asked. He stepped back into the mist. I already did. And vanished. When she tried to trace his path, the system logged nothing. No heat. No pressure. Not even a name. Only one new line in the mission readout. When the jungle moves, don't chase it. Let it come to you. The next match was in 6 days. The jungle had time. It began, as these things so often did, with music composed entirely of screams. The amphitheater's opening ceremony orchestra, an eclectic ensemble of sentient gourds, vibrating sand, and a 12-lunged flautist, launched into their blood-curdling anthem as light strobed across the chrome and chitin arena. Crowds shrieked approval in 7 distinct wavelengths, some of which gave humans nosebleeds. Mira Ellis stood alone in the southern gate tunnel, her boots pressed into a floor that hummed like it was alive and anxious. Probably was. Across the way, Scarveth emerged from his holding cell with the slow arrogance of tectonic plates. He didn't walk, he advanced like a storm front. Behind him, the gate retracted with a hiss, as if exhaling some forbidden prayer. From the stands, the cheers reached their crescendo. And then, abruptly, silence. Mandatory. Enforced by the psychic moderator fields the amphitheater deployed before combat began. A voice rang out, dripping ceremony like oil down a temple wall. Combatants, you stand upon the sacred floor of reckoning. Let it be known, this is not war. This is sport. This is culture. This is entertainment authorized by 79 galactic charters and 12 clandestine rituals no one fully understands. Begin. The floor beneath Mira shifted subtly. Not enough to trip her. Just enough to remind her that everything here had been designed by creatures who didn't understand the human concept of fair. Scarveth didn't hesitate. He lunged, 8 meters in a single bound, armored claws slicing air. Mira rolled under him, feeling the heat of his kinetic field graze her neck. The crowd erupted again, its collective consciousness filtered and amplified through empathic feedback loops that made the very walls pulse with anticipation. Mira hit the ground running. No banter. No opening threats. Just movement. The terrain had changed. She'd expected that. The arena no longer mimicked the stylized jungle from her previous match. Now, it was something worse. A hybrid design, thick alien foliage twisted with industrial rot. Razor vines climbed scaffolding. Pools of acid nestled beneath camouflage ferns. The jungle had been remixed, urbanized, corrupted. She weaved between obstacles, always keeping Scarveth in her periphery. He was fast. Faster than Zoolocked by a factor of cruelty. He didn't stalk, he consumed space. Her first throw was a feint. A spike spear into the wall behind him. It triggered a detonation vine, bright, concussive, but he barely flinched. He kept coming. He's not trying to kill me, Mira realized. He's trying to overwhelm me into surrender. The psychological play was clear, dominance through spectacle. And it was working. The audience leaned into it, roaring with the kind of visceral hunger that made entire species change their diets. But Mira wasn't here for the audience. She ducked under a beam, slid through a fallen arch, and found what she was looking for, the sensor blind spot. A pocket in the arena's neural mesh mapping where the AI's attention dropped due to interference from the bioluminescent fungus clinging to the walls. She stopped running, breathed once, twice, then reversed course. Scarveth entered the blind spot seconds later. Mira was waiting. Her strike wasn't flashy. It wasn't even visible to the crowd. A single blade, low and fast, straight to the underside of his left knee joint, a vulnerable hinge exposed only in mid-stride. The impact didn't disable him. It did something worse. It surprised him. He stumbled. Briefly. Enough for Mira to disappear again. The crowd's collective gasp rippled through the feedback fields. Scarveth growled, a sound like crushed starship hulls, then fired a plasma bolt at random, lighting up the terrain with indiscriminate rage. Mira moved through shadow. Let him thrash. Let him announce his anger. She knew the jungle. You didn't fight it head-on. You became part of it. You let the predator forget you were a threat. 2 minutes passed. Then 3. A silence crept into the amphitheater, infected with doubt. Scarveth stood in the open now, scanning the environment. His armor shifted colors with his moods, now veering into furious ultraviolet. The bookies began adjusting odds in real time, and Myra's count jumped from 500,000 to 50,000 to 3,000 to even. Scarveth charged again. Mira stepped out of cover not to evade, but to bait. She led him toward the scaffold line, the edge of the arena where the metal supports met organic architecture. She knew the material here was unstable, designed for drama, not durability. She waited until he was mid-sprint, then jumped sideways and slashed a load-bearing vine with her backup blade. The scaffold cracked. Not enough to collapse, but enough to tilt. Scarveth stumbled again. That was when she struck in full. Her attack was poetry. A climb up a hanging beam. A wall run. A somersault that brought her above him. She landed a blow to his shoulder node, another to his hip servos. Tiny strikes. Precision work. This wasn't brute force. It was editing. She was cutting pieces of a system apart, one at a time. Scarveth howled. Not in pain. In confusion. He'd trained for violence, not subtraction. He backed off, re-evaluating. That was new. Mira landed across from him, crouched low, breathing even. The audience was silent again. Not by field enforcement this time. Just silent. She spoke, the first words of the match. You think jungle means chaos. That's why you lost before you started. Scarveth growled something in Gravockic. It roughly translated to, you die next breath. Cute, Mira said. But we train with death. You train with simulations. He charged again. But slower. Thinking now. He adapted his movements, closed his stance, stopped overextending. Smart. So she changed too. She stopped dodging. Let him land a hit, just a glancing blow across her ribs. Blood. Real this time. The amphitheater howled. But Mira smiled. Because now he was close. And she had what she needed. She ducked under his guard and drove her final blade, short, unremarkable, ceremonial-looking, into the center of his chest, between his upper plates. Nothing happened. Not immediately. The crowd leaned forward. Then Scarveth spasmed, fell to his knees, twitched once, then collapsed with the elegance of a felled mountain. Silence. Absolute. Then, slowly, chaos. The audience reaction defied physics. Cheers. Wails. 9 languages exploded into untranslatable fervor. Somewhere, a diplomat vomited in disbelief. Mira stood over the body and removed the blade. Turned it over. It wasn't metal. It was a splinter of earth jungle wood, coated in spores from a fungus native to no other planet. The same spores that had killed 2 full squads during Operation Vinesweep. Bioadaptive neurotoxin. Delayed release. No antidote. She'd planted it days ago. Trained for the window. Everything else had been distraction. Scarveth had never stood a chance. Arena medics poured in, trying to look useful. Analysts screamed at screens. Betting markets went into full shutdown, initiating galactic financial lockdown protocols. And Mira? She walked out. Didn't wave. Didn't gloat. Just disappeared down the same tunnel she'd entered from, boots echoing in stunned silence. Backstage, 19TTH was waiting. You broke 17 bylaws of acceptable combat, it said. I followed the rules, Mira replied. They never said I had to win politely. 19TTH chittered. Do you know what this means? Yes. No more fights. They'll never let you in that ring again. Good. Why? Because now they'll remember the jungle. She walked past him, her side bleeding, her step slow but sure. He called after her. You were never meant to win. She didn't turn. I wasn't meant to lose, either. As she vanished into the corridor's dark, flickering light, the amphitheater behind her imploded into debate, panic, and recalibration. The galaxy had mocked Earth's wilderness. Now it knew. The jungle didn't mock back. It waited. Then it moved. And when it did, things fell apart. Mostly aliens. The diplomat from the glorious 8th Spiral Cluster was the first to explode. Not metaphorically, there was no time for metaphor anymore. He simply swelled, ruptured, and smeared himself across 3 seats and an ambassador from the Cephaloran Collective. Biosecurity bots zipped in with perfunctory efficiency, scrubbing tentacles and lamentations from the marble gallery. Mira Ellis didn't look back. She was halfway through the service corridor that threaded beneath the arena's podium-level chaos, her boots leaving precise prints in the condensation from busted coolant vents. One boot print smeared red. She didn't limp, though her side ached with a deep, toothy pain that promised infection or worse. Combatant Ellis, buzzed a soft, synthetic voice from the wall. Do not proceed further. Await escort for debrief. She didn't stop. The lights flickered. That was new. Normally, the amphitheater's subterranean systems ran smoother than galactic tribunals. Flickering meant something had gone wrong in the mainframe. She suspected Scarvetha's defeat hadn't been anticipated by any system less sentient than a full-bore quantum godmind. Which meant bureaucracies were panicking. Good. Behind her, the crowd's noises grew stranger. Arguments. Screeches. High-cast clicks of protest. At least 2 ancient languages being revived solely to properly insult Earth's representative. Still she walked. The tunnel opened into a private lift, unadorned, unmarked, and shielded. Mira stepped in. The doors closed. The hum was familiar. Quiet, like a knife sliding home. She leaned back against the wall. Exhaled. The tension didn't leave her muscles. It never did. She didn't unwind. She didn't unravel. She just retracted. Coiled back into the shape of a woman they still thought was ornamental. Until today. Above, the diplomatic tier disintegrated into beautiful disaster. The Martian delegate tried to explain, in exhausted Earth standard, that the match had been fully sanctioned. That no rules had been broken. The Chancellor of the United Stellar Hegemony snarled, "She used Earth flora. Is that not a weapon of mass destabilization?" One of the Chloran ministers clicked, "She used wood, Chancellor. And spores. She fought within the letter of the law. Then the law is incorrect." A diplomatic brawl began, slow at first, words and threats, then faster, with gravity-nullifying punches and portable sonic ethics deployed like hand grenades. The galactic consensus fractured in real time. The news feeds were already rewriting the narrative. Galactic champion defeated by primate with stick. Human jungle tactics raise red flags among council. Do we need fungus control treaties? Somewhere, Mira was being called both a war criminal and a prophet. Back in the lift, she removed the blade from her boot. The tip still shimmered faintly with neurospore residue. She slipped it into a vial and sealed it with a thumbprint. It clicked shut with the satisfaction of a good decision. The lift opened onto the lower platform hangar. It was nearly empty, most personnel still focused on the arena fallout above. She walked across the floor toward her assigned ship, a battered Earth-standard infiltration vessel humorously nicknamed the Rusty Diplomacy. Mira liked it. It didn't try to look powerful. It simply was. 19th waited by the gangplank, nervously plucking at its own mandibles. "You understand what you've done," it said, words skittering over its exoskeletal lips. "Yes," she replied, without breaking stride. "You've destabilized the games. The betting syndicates are bankrupt. The Voxid cult is calling this a holy war. They've declared your victory a divine betrayal. I didn't ask them to watch. They always watch. You were supposed to give them a close match. A narrative, not a message." Mira stopped at the bottom of the ramp. She turned, her face still calm, voice barely above a whisper. "They spent a century mocking jungle warfare because it doesn't translate into entertainment. That's not my fault. That's their ignorance." 19th hissed. "You humiliated a war hero. Scarveth was the pride of the unified quadrant. He died confused, not humiliated. He didn't die." Mira raised an eyebrow. "He'll recover in 3 to 5 cycles," 19th admitted. "The spores don't kill Gravokians. Not immediately. Then he gets to live with it." She turned back toward the ship. "You're a fool," 19th said behind her. "No," she called back. "I'm a soldier who wasn't supposed to be invited." 19th clacked its mandibles, uncertain whether to report her or applaud. As she boarded the ship, notifications began flooding galactic channels. The amphitheater's mainframe issued a statement declaring an immediate suspension of jungle-class combat events. Earth's diplomatic rank was revised from Observer Minor to Cautionary Notable. Trade negotiations with human colonies were frozen pending inquiry. Mira powered up the ship's engines, fingers dancing over familiar controls. She didn't look at the messages. Didn't need to. She knew what came next. A soft chime. Incoming signal. She didn't answer. Another chime. She tapped it without looking. "You really did it," came a voice from Earth. Colonel Amar Singh. Former CO. Also former ally, according to some lists. "I did," she replied. "You'll be summoned to testify. They'll drag you before the coalition judiciary." "They can drag me. Won't change the result." "Why?" That hung in the silence between them. Longer than necessary. Mira leaned back. "They forgot," she said finally, "that Earth's jungles aren't decorations. They're intelligence networks. Every root a tripwire. Every leaf a strategy. They call it wild because they can't predict it. They never respected it. And you thought one match would teach them?" "No. I thought one loss might." Singh was quiet. Then, "You're going to be hunted." "I already was." She ended the call. The Rusty Diplomacy launched without ceremony, exiting the station's gravity net like a whispered protest. No escort. No fanfare. The comms stayed silent. Not because no one wanted to speak. Because no one knew what to say. Back on the station, a full audit of arena rules was underway. Interpretations were being rewritten, retroactively adjusted, aggressively debated by species that measured victory in blood, algorithms, or divine resonance. Somewhere deep in the star cluster's bureaucracy, a junior clerk filed the first paperwork for an official jungle clause. It passed 3 internal committees before the quorum realized the clause made the jungle legally sentient. They removed it, reluctantly. Scarvetha's recovery logs showed elevated anxiety. His neural patterns indicated recursive simulation errors. He was dreaming of foliage. Over and over. In a private bunker on a moon no one officially named, 3 of the galaxy's top military strategists dissected Myra's fight footage. They watched it frame by frame. "She never fights back at first," said one. "She disappears. She waits." They watched again. No one spoke the obvious truth. She had made herself a ghost in a place that worshipped noise, then returned only to cut the heart out of its pride. On her ship, Mira poured herself a cup of water. Unflavored. Room temperature. She took a long sip and stared at the NAV screen blinking toward Earth's outer colonies. She could go home. For a while. Or disappear again. The silence of the ship wasn't lonely. It was deliberate. She set the cup down, and spoke, not to the ship, but to the air around her. "Next time," she said softly, "send someone who's actually been to a jungle." Then she kicked off her boots. Still caked in mud. Still carrying traces of spores that no longer glowed, but hadn't died. One landed on the deck. Microscopic. Invisible. It began to spread. Far away, in the bureaucratic hive of the Galactic Concord, a representative filed an emergency protocol to classify all Terran biomes as potentially weaponizable. It passed in 4 minutes. They banned Earth jungle imports. Mira smiled in her sleep. The mic drop had landed. And the mud. That was just the reminder.